All right, hello. I'm Donor Dan, living in Miami right now, Southern Florida. Just moved here from Germany. I was born and raised in Germany for most of my life, but donor conceived in Durham, North Carolina. My mother, she had me when she was in her late 30s. She is a single mother by choice and was very happy and lucky to have me through a bank donor who later became an open donor. So when I was 15 years old, I was able to reach out to not just all my half siblings, but also to him. So I know my half siblings, I know my donor, I know his wife, I know his own children. I talk to him regularly, actually, almost daily about my experience as a donor, the things he would have done differently, and so on. But before I go, into those details, I have a full brother. My mother spent in the high six figures to have both my brother and me because she had fertility issues. She was living a American professor lifestyle. She's a professor in psychology, so she maybe wasn't living in a way where it would be, optimal for her fertility. And she was in her late 30s when she had my brother and myself. So she had to spend a ton of money to have him and me, basically to the point where the doctors in the last round said, when she was running out of money, and we Germans, we don't take on debt, so when we run out of money, we run out of money. Um, she said that when she had no more money left, they gave her a 30% chance for my brother, and she was actually lucky enough to have my brother, and I was lucky enough to have my brother as well. I always knew I was donor conceived. My mother was always open about it. I was never lied to by my own parents, like other donor conceived people have, had these traumatizing kind of situations with their families where their own mother, their own dad, father were lying to them about their biological heritage or their donor conception story. That was never the case. My mother always shared everything she could with me, including the audio files of my donor and stories about him. She presented him as the best donor in the entire world that she could find, and I was very, motivated to know that I had great tested and healthy genetic background on that side. So for me, it was like the most normal thing in the world to grow up with a single mother by choice. It was not always easy because my mother was a full-time professor and she was raising two boys, which in a family hierarchy can become difficult, especially nowadays when people don't live in intergenerational tribes anymore, but instead have more this individualistic family setup where you are disconnected from uncles, aunts, grandparents, and so on. So that was pretty tough for my mother, but also in part sometimes for me growing up. Um, and then after school, or when I was 15, my donor reached out to me the first time. Um, he signed up to the donor sibling registry where most people met their half siblings. I had already met a bunch of my half siblings. They were like distant cousins to me. People overthink half siblings a lot when they're not in the donor conception industry, but it's really, you know, kind of like having cousins. Some cousins you never really meet. Some cousins might be around. Some cousins you don't even know you have them, right? Plus, the genetic makeup of them is similar to the one you would have with a cousin. Like the percentage is, I think, more with a half sibling, but it still goes into that direction rather than a full sibling, right? People sometimes say, "Oh, having so many siblings around the world must be so weird and so crazy and so strange," but it has nothing to do with a sibling, to be honest.
Mhm.
I think donor conceived cousin would make more sense than half sibling by the wording, but half sibling is the genetically correct term, of course. So I knew those before, and then when I was 15, my father he reached out to us and he invited me to visit him in California, go on a road trip with him to Yosemite National Park. I met him, got to know him. He just divorced his first wife, and she left with three of his kids, which is why he was open to meeting his donor conceived children again. His first wife was kind of a little bit of a mate suppressionist there, trying to keep him away from his biologically related donor conceived children. She didn't want him to reach out. After that divorce, he was able to reach out to us, able to connect to us. I was one of the most interested in the network of half siblings. Some of my half siblings are closer, some are more distant, some I've talked to once, some I've talked to in person. Some are like friends to me. It's really a broad spectrum of the network of half siblings, what it looks like. And then When I was 18, after school, I spent my gap year with my father and his wife, his now wife, in California, which shaped me a lot. I learned a lot of things from him that I could not have learned from my mother. He opened my eyes to many things. I was very happy that I could spend a gap year with him. Um, and get to know his wife. Plus, he had another half sibling of mine, so he had another daughter with his wife while I was there. So that was very formative for me and very shaping, because most people growing up in their teenage years or as young adults have no connection to babies or young children at all. If you go to college, you don't see any kids. If you go to school, you don't see any people much younger than you. You don't see any babies. Usually people have two or three kids, so you don't grow up with like constantly new siblings growing or joining in. So that was a very big, important decision in my life to, get closer to my donor father there and connect to him more, on a, family friendly kind of friendship level. And then after that, I went to Germany. I built a business for secondhand clothing in Germany. I always kind of felt like I wanted to build something with a long lasting, big impact for whoever is important to me, but also humanity itself. So I built a secondhand business, which grew to 16 stores and 100 employees when I was 21 years old. Um, I did not go to college. I decided, nowadays with university, in some things, if you want to become an entrepreneur, if you want to grow a healthy and strong family, college is not necessarily the best way to do it. It might make sense for like lawyers or doctors. I decided for me and my path, it did make sense to do it. So I built the business instead. Did really well with the business for a while, and then a business when it was in Germany, where like the taxes, the larger your business become, the harder the taxes also go onto your business. You have like a 19% sales tax. You pay 30% social security for people, for the free healthcare, they like to say in the US. And then, sorry, there's no such thing as free healthcare, but
Yeah.
um, we had to pay all those things, and then we had COVID coming in and out, and like stores opening and closing, and all that stuff happening. Um, to a point where the business was so big that I couldn't control which direction it would take anymore, because basically, government decisions would decide whether or not something would work out or not. I also made some mistakes myself, so the business went bankrupt when I was 23 years old. But I was lucky enough that I had invested enough money from my own income when it first went well, into real estate, so I could take some time and think about, reconsider what I wanted to do with my life. Did I want to build huge systems and infrastructures and institutions that would impact humanity, or did I want to take more care of myself and my own health, because building a business was very exhausting, and not very healthy as well for my cortisol levels. Probably my sperm quality was probably terrible during that time, as a founder, at least when the bankruptcy hit.
Yeah.
Um, and so I said, I want to spend more time on my health. I want to travel. I built some communities, around masculinity and around, masculinity and health for men, because I felt like, um, there was no such place like that, and there was no like safe space where men could connect to each other, with each other, learn from each other, um, and kind of grow with each other as well. So I built, two communities in that space. I was a co-founder of one, and then built my own. And then I realized that I still wanted to do more and have a bigger impact. I went to California again to visit my family. I did so every 2 years or so, to visit my donor conceived family and my half siblings, which are now three from his, second marriage. So he has six kids of his own. And those three I got to know, they're my closer friends and almost like siblings to me, like distant siblings. Um, and I connected well with them, and I wanted to see them regularly. And then one time I went to California, and my girlfriend could not handle the distance that I was there, and she broke up with me. So I decided I wanted to become a donor instead, because I realized having a family or helping people have a family at a young age is incredibly difficult. But the people that are in my family, they trust me. Like I can leave for a couple of years and come back to California, and they still love me and they still care for me. They still want to be around me. They're more of a tribe for me than a girlfriend who I dearly loved and wanted to have a family with and wanted to have children with, right? So I said, hey, I still want to have my own family. I still want to be a young father, but I don't know when that will be the case. So I saw my half siblings and how much they impacted me and my relationship to family and to life, where I decided I want my own kids to have half siblings too someday. And best case, these half siblings are older than my own kids. Plus, you don't know how family goes for yourself. Even if you set everything up perfectly, you can have a great marriage for 10 years and then it can go to shit. And your kids are gone. In most, in most legislations, you, as a man, don't have the cards in your hand when it comes to custody and those kind of things. So
Hmm.
I said it actually makes sense for me to become a donor myself. I did some research on the banks at that time, because I, 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 I didn't want to pay any taxes. I couldn't stay in one place for too long because then you would have to pay taxes wherever you live. So if you have a German citizenship, then you don't spend more than a certain amount of days in Germany or in one country. You don't have to pay any taxes. Legally, which is, I don't know, for Americans it's a bit different, but for Germans in Europe it is that way.
Hmm.
And so I couldn't stay in one place for too long, but sperm banks would have wanted me in one place for too long. And I also, because they do all the testing, they do all the work, they want you for more than a couple months in one place to harvest your milk or your sperm, right? So I felt like that's kind of a cattle way of doing things, and I felt like it was impersonal. And I loved the fact that the kids and I were connected openly, and I knew everyone. And my father had kept good track, and there was a donor sibling registry. And so I said, well, how about I just become an open donor from day one? And I looked into the open donor industry, and I saw the open donor industry is crappy too. But at least it's a place where I can, with my experience in entrepreneurship and building communities or building, a leadership persona, it's something I can tackle, something I can handle, something I can work with. Like I don't have to spend hundreds of thousands to build my own sperm bank and then go lobby in some government systems to try and change things for the better for donor conceived people and
Hmm.
my own biological donor conceived children, or the future children of my own, which these choices will impact then at some point. Um, so I said, okay, cool. I will become an open donor. And that's what I did now for 1.5 years. I've been an open donor and I have traveled the world 3 times as an open donor, as a traveling donor. I have helped 18 families internationally. My donor fees have ranged from anywhere from $0 to $35,000 during my travel as an open and known donor. Depends a lot on who are the recipients, where are the recipients, in what way do they need me, what kind of responsibilities do they want me to take in the future as an open donor. So it is a very large spectrum. Um, and then I also built the Open Donor Association, which I found that coming into the donor industry, there's safe spaces for donor conceived people, there's safe spaces for recipients, but there's no space for donors to connect to each other, support each other in making the right decisions, being a great donor, and those kind of things, right? Because we donors are the minority. There's 100,000 donor conceived people every year, 100,000 recipients every year, but just a couple hundreds of open donors and maybe a couple thousands sperm bank donors, right? And sperm bank donors, they want to stay anonymous most of the time, so they're not going to build any community. They're not going to connect and support each other in like how to live healthier and how to be a responsible donor. So I decided to start the Open Donor Association, kind of trying to lead by example with my experience as a donor conceived donor. We now have around 30 members in the general community. We're soon going to launch the first open donor catalog where you're able to connect to the donor, talk to the donor, have a video call with the donor before you move forward, where we don't just make sure the donors have all the important testing that sperm banks require from their donor, but we also make sure that they live a healthy and tested lifestyle, that they have stable lives, that they're not, because the sperm banks, they've had things like homeless people showing up and giving donations, right? They've had creeps and like weird guys go there, people with aggression issues or anxiety issues that they didn't share, and those kind of things. Because we are a community and we know each other fairly well, we connect and we talk a lot, it's pretty safe to say that the quality of donors that I have found in the Open Donor Association is much higher than those you can work with at sperm banks. Plus, again, you can connect from day one. Um, so I said, because the demand was higher for me than I could help myself, and because my fees were sometimes at points where people could not pay for them, but I couldn't help them because I had other recipients paying those fees. And I knew if I used those fees in a nonprofit way to support my health and my future family, like my whole business, the Open Donor Association, and my own persona, Donor Dan, or my donor work, Donor Dan, is all nonprofit. I will have to prioritize recipients paying the fees or the recipients more local. And so logistically and financially, I couldn't help everyone that wanted to work with me, which is why I said, okay, wow, cool, let's just connect them to other great donors, because there must be other men out there. And I found it to be one of the hardest things in my life to find men who are willing to do this kind of work. Um, and it has a lot of reasons which I'm pushing back against, like all the time. You know, we have the incest fallacy with open donors, which makes no sense. If you have an open donor and you raise your kid to talk to the other person before you have sex with a stranger, then there's no risk of incest, right? Because everyone knows who their open donor is. That's one of the many examples of where donors are actively mate suppressed in larger society. Open donors, however, you know, that's why I said we have to collaborate and work with each other. We have to push back to help people make the best choice, and have healthy children. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm also working on international shipping for open donors. So the Open Donor Association is going to be the first place where you can not just talk to your donor before you get a sample, but also get international shipping, from fresh samples with higher MOT than if you went to a sperm bank. Because sperm banks, they sometimes let their donors send samples in with a certain extender, medical grade, clinical grade extender, to make the sperm viable for up to 4 or 5 days. It's usually milk based or egg based. It's like sperm swimmers can also survive in a woman for up to 5 days, right? So something similar can be done with milk based or egg based, extender, sperm extender. And some banks, they have the donor send them in, and then they freeze it, and then they split it up, and then they sell it. So they're like a middleman, useless kind of agency in between, to be honest. There's a few reasons why they are there. So a lot of it is like governance and legal reasons and stuff like that, but they're not really necessary because the donors can also directly ship to their recipients internationally. And that's what the Open Donor Association is working on as well.
Very interesting. Okay. There's a lot of intriguing stuff in there. I guess the first area that I will dig into will be what's, as a donor yourself, what sort of advice did you seek from your donor father as you were initially planning on becoming a donor and embarking on this journey that you're now on?
So one of the things I like to mention, also to recipients, which, you know, I want to motivate them to at least let their child connect to their donor if the child wants to. Like I'm not involved donor or co-parent or anyone trying to push into their family, because to me, they're a family, here's a family, there's a family. All of it is, you know, could be talked about as like an extended kind of family, or an extended kinship family network, where you have like people around the world with their own, inner circle families. That's how I describe it. I like to motivate them to connect to donors. And what I sometimes say, or at least to let the child connect to the donor if it wants to. And what I like to say sometimes, as an example, is when I first got to California, my father gave me dating advice that my mother could have never given me, because my father told me the things that women react to, and my mother told me the things that she thought women would like, right? And those are very different things in both my experience, his experience, and also her experience, right? Like my mother, says things what she would want, and then maybe does something else. Um, and so that was a very, you know, important thing for me as a growing up young adult, because it made it so much easier for me to get to know women, to get to know cultures, and put myself out there. My mother, for example, she told me the women are going to love if you play the violin. So I started playing the violin when I was 8 years old, right? And then I played the violin until I was like 14 or 15 years. And then I realized no one gives a shit if I play the violin. Um, so it's well-meant advice, and maybe my mother does like a violin player, but it was very different to what my father later told me what women are actually interested in. So I could work between those two things, for sure. That was some great advice he gave me. He also has 6 kids of his own, and 17 donor conceived children. So he knows things that a lot of men with no family or few children would never know or not be able to relate to, and he could share those perspectives and ideas. So that was really interesting. And then, of course, just the cultural difference, like having connections to people in different cultures, both my half siblings who come from different cultures and different areas, plus and my donor father. There's just so much to learn there, and so much to be able to connect to, and the travel opportunities you get from having the network of half siblings and an open donor father. So I'm very, very thankful he became an open donor and actually took that step, because I know a lot of donor conceived people to this day do not know who their biological father is, and I think it's very sad. But I do have to distinguish, and in order to protect the open donors and the Open Donor Association, I often have to make this draw this line and say, hey, you have this trauma as a donor conceived person because your parents lied to you, or because you never were able to reach out to your donor and don't know how many half siblings you have. All these issues, open donor is a different industry than the anonymous donors industry, right? It's comparing bicycles to like fighter jets, right? It's really two different things. And I'm not judging or blaming anyone for it, but a lot of the anonymous donor fears, they creep into the open donor industry. And in the open donor industry, the open donors, because they're open, they can actively be attacked. Their reputations can actively be destroyed, right? So if you take these fallacies from one and put them into the other, then you're going to end up with the situation that not a lot of men want to become open donors, that they're scared of doing it, scared for their reputation, scared that someone will hate them, dislike them, or they won't be able to meet women. But yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I get off question sometimes.
No, no. Well, I appreciate where you were going there, because I'm curious if you were able to identify like a triggering moment with regard to your donor father, because he was originally an anonymous donor, but then eventually said, wait a minute, like I need to be open about this. What do you think flipped the switch there for him? What happened, or what were the circumstances that made him think, maybe I need to be available to these people?
He always wanted to connect to his donor conceived children, but his first wife was suppressing him. She was having paternal investment instincts that women have, right? Where you say you want as much paternal investment as you can get, and other women are like dangerous. Other families, other children will be dangerous for that situation. So she told him he's not allowed to connect to his donor conceived children.
Uh-huh.
Once that marriage, once they got to a divorce, he was able to connect to us, and he did right away, just weeks after.
Right. So, but I guess what I'm wondering is, I guess when he donated, did he have the option to be an open donor, or was it only
No,
anonymous?
I don't think so. I think all donors back then were anonymous. Otherwise, my mother would have chosen an open donor.
Right. Okay. Got it.
He
Okay.
might
So
might have been open at 18. He might have been open at 18. I'm not quite sure, to be honest.
okay.
I think I remember someone, was my mother or my father, saying it would have been an option for open at 18. But
Hmm.
even if you have that, you don't know if the donor is wanting to have contact in 18 years, right?
Yeah.
If he's committed to connecting as well, if the child wants to. Plus, 18 is too late for a developing child, in my opinion, to be able to connect to the genetic heritage on the paternal side of biology. Because for me, it was so great to have this connection in my teenage years. And to be connected to him during those years. And some of my half siblings who did connect to the network of half siblings and my donor father in their teenage years, who connected when they were older or adults, they have a more distant relationship, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think if you have that option earlier to connect earlier, I think it's just beneficial, given that you're working with a great donor. Of course, if you're working with a problematic open donor, which we don't allow in the Open Donor Association, then that's a bunch of issues. But yeah.
Yeah. Right. So on the note of having, a daily, communication with your donor, and having a connection that, um, seems pretty close. Um, let's talk about like the first time you ever actually met with him, and what sort of emotions and feelings came up as you were first getting to know each other, especially from like the nature side of the nature versus nurture debate. Like, what did you see in him that you could point to and say, "Oh, I carry part of that with me too." Like, let's unpack um, what the experience was like that first time you met him.
So when I first met him, I could see some physical features, but now that I've gotten older, I can see more of those popping out. Like he has a very strong jawline. His hair color is very similar to mine. He looks similar to me. When people see him, they say, of course, like you can tell he's your biological father. So you definitely have those things. And then there were also a lot of things, my brother says the same, that we both carry or have. For example, him and I were a little bit goofy sometimes. We are not like so like serious about everything. Some things we just think are goofy or we make fun of, and we have this kind of humor that him and I, my brother and I, we always kind of understood each other and we always thought it was funny. But on the German side, my German family is more serious, except for my grandfather, so we have some humor there too, but a lot of them are very serious. And then my father, he had this like goofy kind of side as well about him, where he was like, a fun guy, doing fun things. He was also into secondhand things. I love secondhand stuff.
Yeah.
There were definitely a few things where his epigenomes were translated into mine. And if you look into the science of things, you can see that every action a donor takes, everything he puts inside of himself, all the toxins he exposes himself to, or avoids, all the food he eats, translates into a change in his genetic setup, even to a point where if the semen is inserted inside of a woman, her genetic setup changes a little bit with it too. Semen even has like an antidepressant kind of function in women. There's studies on this topic. My donor father was the one who told me this. Um, and if you have like a toxic donor who has a lot of environmental toxins around himself, like he uses deodorant or he drinks alcohol, smokes, drinks tap water, those kind of things, then that is the microplastics and all the issues, all the toxins are found in the semen as well, and can fuck with the hormonal balance of a woman. So a lot of women are not they might know that, okay, yeah, he looks like this and he looks like that, and that will end up with my children. But what a lot of people are not aware of is that everything will kind of be passed on in one way or the other. Of course, nurture is like a huge thing that comes later as well. But at any point in time, the things you do will later, be have consequences, positive or negative consequences. And that doesn't start the moment the child is born. That starts years before.
Right. Yeah. The behaviors, you have to set them in place, and make sure they're on point, especially for a donor. I assume you have some pretty healthy daily practices, knowing that you are helping other families, bring life into the world. So that's a big responsibility for you to be carrying in order to have to, maintain your own health and be mindful of your own behaviors. So you mentioned that there's three siblings that the donor had through his first marriage, and then three in his second marriage. Um, how much further does your sibling pod extend? Do you know how many other donor siblings are out there?
There are 17 more donor siblings out there.
Okay. And of the 17, just roughly how many of them have chosen to explore these relationships rather than shy away from them?
I would say eight to 10 of them have been pretty, interested in it. Some have said things like, "Oh yeah, let's meet or let's talk," and then it hasn't gotten to it.
Uh-huh.
Just like you have some friends who said, "Okay, yeah, when you're there, let's meet up," but then you never end up meeting up, which is not
Yeah.
anyone's fault. It's just, I guess, if they're not part of your tribe, because we humans are wired to have tribes of like 150 people in our life.
Mhm.
Much more is not healthy. Much less is not healthy. And so when most people have 150 people in their circle in some way or the other that they would trust enough to consider it kind of tribal. Um, and so, if you already have your tribe, if you already have your people and you're already connected and got stuff going on, then the chance is lower that you will want to connect to others. Now, growing up, I only had one brother and my professor mother. I had friends at school, that was no problem at all. But besides that, my family was not so big. Like some of my half siblings have very large Jewish families on their mother's side, right? So they have huge families and are less interested in like adding more people into their mental tribe or into their extended family. It really depends. And I think the great thing about the open network of half siblings is the option of connecting, the option of having healthy children from other healthy mothers that also chose a healthy father, which I tell my recipients as well. You don't just get to work with me as your donor, but you also know that the other recipients I work with are screened and filtered in a way the sperm banks could never do it because they sell out the sperm to whoever purchases it.
Got it. Okay. So, yeah, let's shift towards your work with the Open Donor Association. You had mentioned before that there were about 30 men, I believe, that were involved in this and that it was extremely difficult for you to find these men. Talk to me a little bit more about what that search was like and where you ultimately found people willing to be a part of this.
So there's platforms and groups in different places, um, like Facebook groups. There was like a huge black market basically for open donors around the world and different platforms. And whenever I saw someone, I came across someone, I was like, he looks healthy, he looks good, he has a nice description, nice introduction. Let's help him connect to more recipients and let's help recipients connect to him. I would invite him to the Open Donor Association. But only very few men are first interested in becoming an open donor in that way because they maybe want to lie about a few things in their life or they're scared of child support and they don't want to take like the serious path of like the fertility maxer, extended family donor maxer. They want to keep it kind of um, more private or quiet. Maybe they have a wife or what. There's a lot of reasons why donors don't want to be open donors but not join the association. And then we also have like donors sign up on our website, of which we have to decline most donors for health reasons, like their spermiograms don't look good, they have genetic carriers, they are overweight, they have issues that you can see physically. They don't want to say they are obese or they have smoking issues, but you can tell by the pictures that they send in that they are not healthy um, donor options, and they, recipients would, if they want to work with the Open Donor Association, expect us to make sure that there's at least a healthy foundation. Like no one is perfect, right? Um, and I tell this my recipients too. The sperm banks, they win on the fact that a lot of women recipients are choosing for mysteriousness. They like to have this anonymous picture and in their own fantasy and what they were taught by movies or by pop culture, they draw out the rest of the image of this perfect man who's the donor on the website, right? And this image does not exist. It's fantasy. But the sperm banks, they make money off this kind of mystery box thing, right? And you're going to unbox the mystery box eventually because genetic testing is available and people can test and see who's my biological father, who are my half siblings. So eventually you're going to have the mystery box unboxing, and oftentimes it's less pleasant than what people thought, and it's never what they expected, which is different with an open donor, where I like to mention, of course, you're never going to align with your donor on everything. Like maybe his eyebrows are off, or his nose is a bit like crooked, or whatever, right? Or his political views do not align with yours. Like there will be something, if you look long enough and search long enough, there will be something you will dislike about that person, which doesn't make it a good reason or choice to say, I'm going to go with an anonymous donor to protect my peace, because it's only a comfort comes at a cost. You will at some point then have to face the consequences of that comfortable or easy kind of choice.
Right. And then talk to me a little bit about the sperm banks and their perspective. Like, are they coming after you? Like, do they have any issues with what you're trying to do? Because you're essentially one of their competitors, from a business perspective, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, with the Open Donor Association, in most of the sperm banks, they can start packing their stuff because by connecting donors directly to recipients, offering higher MOT, offering full open donors, we can do a bunch of things that they cannot legally do, while we can legally do it because our donors are open and they're doing the transaction, they're doing the work. We're not selling, open donor sperm or anything like that. We are offering recipients the connection to the donor, we're connecting them to the donor, and then they can talk about whatever they plan on doing, how many samples or travel or costs involved and expenses and all that stuff, right? So sperm banks are a little bit like you have with the Uber industry. You've seen the cab companies go out of business because Uber said we're going to connect drivers directly to the passengers, right? So it's the same kind of thing. The only reason it's not in place in the sperm donation industry yet is because it's more niche than taxi or Uber. I think the sperm donation industry is about a billion. I would guess that taxi industry is much more than a billion internationally. Um, that's one reason. Plus, you do have a lot of lobbying going on between the sperm banks and the governments. Very strong in places like the UK or Australia, um, where they banned me in the UK from being a donor because I am a public and open donor, and they didn't like some of the publicity some of the newspapers were putting out there in the UK. And then even though they were breaking laws in the process working with me, they filed a report. They got me banned same day, and I filed a report, and I didn't get a response from the governance institution since then. So we're seeing that a lot in like bigger institutions compared to small tribes, where once you have to start making rules and laws for millions of people, things get messy and things get corrupt. Very natural and normal. It's nothing I necessarily judge, but it's definitely something that is obvious to anyone who understands that. Of course, yes, you have the fertility clinics and the banks. They have very high expenses. Their profit margins might be somewhere between 10 or 30%. So it's not like an open donor who can have a profit margin of 80%. I still tell my donors, don't try to make it a for-profit business. Try to make it non-profit and invest the money in your health and the extended family network, future half siblings, connecting to other recipients, and growing your own family. And they do. None of the donors does it to like get rich and buy a car or something. Because once you've created a life with your own work, buying a car feels like, um, you know, what could I compare it to? It feels like comparing a steak with like a raw fish that you just pulled out of the ocean or something like that, right? Um, so that's kind of what it feels like to our donors when they don't go for the for-profit route, really. And so yeah, they will try and push back, but eventually, life will sustain, and life will be stronger than those profit incentivized institutions. So I think there will be a lot of sperm banks going bankrupt in the future. It's already happened before because if they don't lobby enough, the politicians push laws that make them go bankrupt because the politicians have no idea what's going on in the sperm bank. They don't know how much profit margins they're making. They don't like something on paper. They're like, oh, we don't think this is good that people, for example, in the UK, we don't think it's good that people are not able to connect to their donor. We want no anonymous donors anymore, which makes sense, right? I get it. I get why you might make that law, but they implemented that law and no one wanted to be a donor, and some sperm banks had to close like their facilities or the work that they did. So sperm banks have to invest a lot in lobbying, which open donors don't have to do. They just have to be incredible donors, right? They have to invest in themselves. So it's clear to me, but I don't expect the sperm banks to like try and go after me. I expect them at some point to understand the strength of what I do and then collaborate with me. So I'm just waiting for the day that it's happened a bit before where some like sub business from a sperm bank would try and connect to me um, and talk to me because they were like building a platform for open donors, like a Tinder for open donors, and they said, "Hey, can you also help get your donors on the platform or talk about it on your social media?" It hasn't gotten to that, but I think the same will happen to sperm banks. They will realize, oh, like this is actually the future of reproduction. It brings together, the opportunities of the modern day and age with, our instincts and our wishes to know the person we're reproducing with, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so they will see that it's inevitable. And if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it. Other open donors will do it in the Open Donor Association. It's not just me pushing for this change. It's many people. It's donor conceived people pushing for it. It's open donors pushing for it. It's recipients pushing for it. So it's just a matter of time that this change will happen. Me being a donor conceived donor, I just have a pretty good understanding, and I have experience in community leadership that I would um, I don't I'm not scared to do it, and I love doing it.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not like scared of the sperm banks. People have told me before, you should be scared that they're going to kill you or after you, they're going to murder you or something. Just for the record, I'm not suicidal, but I don't think that's how sperm banks work. I think they are businesses, and when they see someone who's doing great in their industry, so they would want to connect rather than try and fight.
Right.
Because
That was my
yeah,
thought as you were explaining this was, initially I thought maybe they would be looking to come after you, but it almost seems like the bigger opportunity is some sort of partnership where they recognize that, open donors are the better choice
right.
for everyone involved.
If they
Um,
could, they would also work with open donors. The reason you don't have the adult pictures from the open donors, you are not able to connect to them, is first because they want to act as an agency, but it's more because of like the laws around it, which is also
yeah.
why it's so incredibly hard to find men who want to be open donors. Because if you tell a guy who's healthy, who has a family and a good income, you're risking child support here, he's out, like no questions
Hmm.
asked. He's like, no, fuck this, I'm not going to do it. So with the sperm banks, they have kind of gotten around that issue by using the audio files, not sharing adult pictures to make sure that. But you could still, if you have a donor who says, I don't care about child support because I'm a traveling donor, or I don't care because I don't have any assets under my name, or I don't care because I'm using an alias and I'm using like slightly edited pictures and stuff like that. If you have a donor who's open for it, it would be awesome for the sperm banks to work with that. So I think the first bank to adapt that and to work with a community of open donors will kind of lead the path in the sperm bank industry. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. Now let's do a little hypothetical here. Let's say I come knocking on your door, and I'm not sure, I'm not sure this is actually for me, but just playing the role for a second, I knock on the door. I say, "Hey, I want to be part of the Open Donor Association. What can I do to help families that are looking to bring life into the world? Like, I want to be a part of this." What sort of screening process do you put me through in order to assess whether or not I'm viable to be part of this?
At first, I would assess your situation, what you want to do, where you want to go as a donor, before I see is this even interesting for you at all? Because some guys, if they want to be an anonymous donor, it's a straight no. Or some other guys where you can tell it's about making money, they want to get rich. It's also not going to be a great match or a great fit. Um, which is also why we have the general community and like the basic courses. We have a whole education system that runs donors through all the things that we have learned on the way. All the donors in the Open Donor Association combine um, probably close to 100 years of experience in the Open Donor Association if you combine all of them together. And we've put all that into one education system that gives a lot of foundational things. um, for general members, the general membership is $25 a month, like nonprofit contribution, because we do want donors to take it seriously as well. We don't just want like random people to join and leave the group in and out. We do want people to kind of take it seriously and to actually consider going through the courses and looking at the things. And once they realize, like, hey, okay, this is actually something I want to do, I understand the basics, I understand what I need to do, they get the most important tests for the golden standard, which is genetic carrier testing, CMV testing, STI, STD testing. We also, they also can start as open donors individually and have the tests paid for by recipients they find themselves, which is, also an option. I think also something good to learn and to do to like see, okay, it's actually also hard to find recipients who will want to work with you. There is a reproductive market value for donors, and it can be higher or less depending on how healthy you are, how attractive you are, how well you present yourself, how intelligent you are, how interesting you are, the things you do with your life, right? recipients care about those things because it will influence their child. Um, so after you have this kind of basic understanding, you can apply for the golden standard donor, which then is a donor who we can refer to recipients confidently. So we can put them on our website. For that, they have to give us all sorts of testing, hormonal tests, the other tests I mentioned before as well. We extend the tests a little bit more than what the most sperm banks would expect from their donors, because I also think like hormonal balance, for example, is also important to assess and make sure, okay, there's no like testosterone use. This donor is not using testosterone. Um, and then once we have all those basic tests and we have all the information from the donor, we can set up a golden standard portfolio for the donor to present him well to the public. Right now, the donors can pay a membership fee for the golden standard, and then we reach out to recipients and we post it. In the future, we will also take the portfolio. We're working on the catalog right now. We have 15 donors lined up. Of the 30 donors in our community, 15 are golden standard. And we take those 15 donors, we put them on our website. Recipients can purchase the portfolio and talk to the donors. And every money made, both from the memberships, but also from recipients, is directly reinvested into the creation of healthy life. So it's directly reinvested into the Open Donor Association, into our education, into making sure that our donors can connect to recipients well, that people stay safe. Both our recipients are educated as well. That's also important. We try to do a lot on recipients end too. We have like content distribution where the stuff I talked about is put out on a lot of different platforms. So there is a lot of cost involved if we want to make it really, really well too, if we want to make it really good too. And I couldn't settle for less because it's about healthy babies. So it's hard to say like, we'll cut some corners here and I don't care about this right there. And so, yeah, that's basically, and then you can, as a golden standard donor, you get messages from recipients who want to work with you. You can share a link with them for them to like sign up for a call with you. You can talk to them. You can talk about logistics, about your costs. You might have donor fees. You might have time involved that you have to, you need to cover if they want you to travel. You have shipping costs involved. So we also make sure that our donors know how shipping works in our education program. And then that's basically it. But it's not something a choice you make overnight, and it's not like we just look at you and we're like, okay, you're a great match. It's something that usually takes some time for us and the donors to like evaluate and see if it is a great match for our recipients, and those that sign up for the Open Donor Association. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, that's all very interesting. I guess on a more general note, as you've embarked on this journey and creating this platform for people, what would you say has maybe been like one of the bigger surprises you've come across, or something that maybe caught you off guard, as you've built this platform?
Oh my God, everything, like everything.
Yeah.
My grandfather always said, everything that you don't expect will happen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been also the case with this, right? Like I've had the Guardian say that I don't share the numbers of family I've helped. The Guardian, the newspaper, they said I don't share the number of families I've helped, but I do, like in my videos all the time. And I've helped 18 families with 20 children right now. Of course, the number changes, but I'm open about it, right? And they put a
Yeah.
lie out there. They don't correct it. They don't give a damn. The laws in the UK are so in a way so that it doesn't really make sense to sue them. But that's just one of many, many things. I also realized that some of the donors who were really pulled through the dirt by the media before, they might not have made the smartest and best choices the way I would do it, but they're not bad human beings. They're not the way the media likes to present them, triggering the fears of humans being like, oh, this man has 100 kids, which in a tribal community is dangerous. If you have a tribe of 100 people and suddenly this guy goes ahead and has 100 kids in that community, the tribe will disintegrate. It will fall apart because of all the incest that's going to happen. And that has happened to tribes before, right? That's why they're not around anymore. That's why there's no incest, right? Because evolutionarily it didn't work out. Now, if you have a donor who works with 100 families internationally, and you make a big thing about it, then people will be scared. They'll be like, oh no, like 100 kids, but it's not like that, right? It's across the world. It's in different places. And if he's an open donor, especially, like there's nothing to worry about either. So there's so many things that I'm just like, I have to like think every day, like, oh my God, why do people believe this? Why do
Yeah.
Why do people believe these lies and being made suppressed like that? And it's sad because it actually, um, you know, at the end of the day means that a life is not born where a life could have been born. So it's constantly me trying to work it out so that lives that can be born will be born. That's really like what I work for every day, and that's why I don't care about anything that will be thrown at me, because if the things I do and the choices I make will result in one more healthy life being born, like myself, like yourself, like a donor conceived life like yourself can be born with the work I did, if that's the kind of pressure and kind of bullshit I have to take in order to have the impact I want to have, then I couldn't care less.
Yeah. And what do you think the motives are behind, I think you mentioned media in the UK, trying to label you as one thing, even though you're openly saying, no, like it's another? Why do you think they're coming after you?
Because it makes clicks. Like they get clicks out of it, and it's they get revenue out of it. They don't make money presenting someone as like, oh, he's a cool guy and doing good things. That's
Yeah.
not how the news makes money. But I still expose myself to mass media. I try to keep a balance between my own work, on my social medias and mass media, because if you go only mass media or you don't put yourself openly out there with your own content or present yourself, people don't have the chance to like research um, your position or what you actually do, right? If they
Hmm.
just trust the mass media and you don't say anything, then there's nothing they can learn and nothing they can like research deeper into. And when I first started, I also said, um, if if media articles about me will scare away people who trust the media and who trust legacy articles, then those are not the kind of people I would want to work with personally. If
Hmm.
I'm interested in a subject and I see an article being written about that person and I'm genuinely interested in that topic, I would research that person more. Like I would go deeper, because I've seen the media like put out a lot of crap over the years. It's not something they've just started doing. It's been like that forever.
Yeah.
Um, because again, they're not trying to talk to their own tribe of 150 people and have them grow and be healthy. They're trying to get revenue from hundreds of thousands of people in form of clicks or purchasing a newspaper or whatever. So it's energy extraction instead of energy providing, which is again normal for large institutions and large companies and people that talk to many. And I try to make sure that the Open Donor Association, we don't fall into that kind of path as an institution. Very interesting to see what path it's going to take over time. But I try not to extract any energy from anywhere, anything, because that energy again could result in a healthy life.
Hmm. Okay. And then from an entrepreneurial perspective, we've covered how you kind of assess the donors that you allow into the Open Donor Association and what sort of steps they need to take to be a part of this. But on the flip side, we've got the recipient parents. And how do you go about, like, thinking about when you were first building this platform? How did you go about connecting with that side of the equation, finding the recipient parents who are out there looking for donors?
So I've learned that about 80 to 90% of donors in the black market are low quality, unhealthy men that I would not want as my biological father if I could make the choice, right? And then I've learned that, and it has its reasons. I'm not saying that these are bad people, and I'm not saying that I'm just saying I would not want them as my biological donor father. And similar things on the recipient side in the black market too. A lot of recipients go into the black market because they can't afford the $1,500 a vial from a sperm bank. If you can't afford $1,500 per vial, that's kind of a red flag. Like you don't need that kind of money to raise a child. A baby is cheap as well, but it's an orange flag at least, right? Um, so we had the same, or we have it with our donors day to day, that they get disrespected by unhealthy recipients. Or I had one donor, most recent story, he asked the recipient for $1,500 in travel expenses because she wanted him to travel 10 hours there and 10 hours back, plus the flight and the hotel. So he asked for $1,500. And then she just posted the chat of him asking for $1,500. And she was like, $1,500 for sperm? That doesn't make sense. But looking at her profile, you understood like why she is like, I don't want to call people stupid, but that she was pretty stupid. And I know it's harsh, and I know that a lot of people, they don't appreciate when I say things this way. because they want to like hear like the fantasy fairy tale kind of story. But it's fact that our donors, our open donors, are also interested in connecting to healthy, intelligent, financially stable, and mentally stable recipients. And that's something I said from day one. I want my recipients to be financially stable, mentally stable, and physically healthy. Um, and of course, there's no way of like checking that 100%. So that's more of a donor recipient kind of relationship that they build when they connect to each other, they talk to each other, right? The way they ask each other. Like when a recipient's first question is like, how much? I get messages like, how much? Question mark. First message, nothing more. No like, hi, hello, nothing. Just how much? Question mark. Do I want that person to share genetic material with me and have like be connected to that person, even if it's only indirectly as a donor? Probably not. You know, maybe she's having a rough day and like busy and stuff, so I might reply, but I also have the option to like look at her profile, um, see what she's like. That's also why we make sure that our donors are contacted on Facebook, because we can set up a Facebook page that keeps the anonymous donor safe and private. He's not anonymous, but the page is not like in his real name. We don't, not all our donors want to share their real name. They want to share pictures and they want to stay in contact, but for child support reasons, they can't share like their real name or home address and things like that, right? Um, so open means they can connect, they can talk, they can have video chats, they can chat and all those things. But yeah, the donors can still look at the recipient's Facebook page, which is why Facebook is a great place to start, because you can look at who are her friends, what does she do for a living, how does she present herself on the internet, how does she talk to you when it comes to something so important and intentional as growing a family. And then every donor has different kind of lines, what they think is okay and what is not. I know donors in the black market who just are treated by recipients terribly, but they still continue doing it because they have an addiction to, you know, having a lot of biological children, which is also again something natural for men to have, this reproductive instinct. That's, we've seen that before with donors who just go into the high numbers, not caring about who are my recipients. Usually, it has consequences in the future, you know, but every choice you make has consequences at some point.
Yeah. Um, there's so many questions that I have still, but they're all floating around. I guess talk to me like you've you've helped build. I think you said was it 18 families
I've helped
or
18 families with 20 children, of which
18
not all
families?
children are born. Some are still pregnant, others are embryos at the banks, but
Okay.
or not at the banks, but at the clinics, because I only do private arrangement at clinics. I would never work with the sperm bank if it was anonymous. I would have
Yeah.
to be open ID first day, and I have to talk to the recipients, which there is no bank that does it, which is why we have the ODA. But I have helped them, and I use those numbers even with the embryos because I don't want people later to say like, oh, it's more than we thought. Less than
Right.
we thought is not a problem, but you don't want to give an impression that you're trying to hide something. So that's why I'd say I include those.
Right. And of the 18 families, I assume they've brought life into the world now and that you have genetic offspring out there. Um, what has that been like for you, knowing that you now have, you know, biological children out there who are connected to you? I don't know if they're of the age yet where they've been able to actually reach out, but just from the perspective of knowing that, like, okay, I've got children out there that share my genetics. What does that feel like, and what do you anticipate as they get older, and what their, you know, what their curiosities might be like?
I feel like knowing that has made me more grounded and more connected to life, because having them on this earth makes me think about choices that I make differently than if I had no future on this earth or no children, biological children, right? Just knowing that they are around makes me want to be even a better man and a future father to my own children as well.
Hmm.
I'm already proud about them for just being born, right? I'm proud of the mothers. I'm proud of the work that I did myself too. Um, and I think that having biological offspring, even if it's not children of your own, is something I would hope every healthy man can experience. I know a lot of men don't want to experience it or are afraid of experiencing it, or have a bunch of distractions or reasons why they don't experience it. But it's work definitely, but it's also possible for everyone to have biological offspring. And I know a lot of donors who have gone from donors to fathers as well. Like being a donor has made them want to be a father even more. Just like myself, I have like seeing those families so happy with the children, understanding relationships and children, and how everything is connected, and we can't just disconnect from our kind of tribal past and ancestry, has made me understand that I have to prioritize my health, and then right after that, my family. Um, and no one else, nothing else is more important than my family except my health. So I'm really trying hard to become a father myself as well, and I'm doing everything that I can to do it. And I think if I was not a donor, I wouldn't try to be a father as much. Maybe I would chase the money, or chase like women, for recreational um, intercourse and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of what I would like to put out there, because I think sadly a lot of men are missing out.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is there anything that so there's so many different angles to look at your story from, because you've got the donor conceived experience yourself, but then you've got the other end of that as an open donor. I guess if you had to sort of distill your experience down into, uh, one key bit that could sum up what your journey has been like and what you'd want to put out there as a message to the community of people that are listening to this, what would that be?
um, my message would be: do not be afraid of life, do not be afraid of creating life and expanding life. Constantly heal, take care of your health, and grow your family. That would be my advice, or what I would put out there and share.
Awesome. I like it. Um, Anything else? I think I covered all the bases here, in terms of what I think I wanted to ask you. Is there anything that we may have missed that
No,
you
I
want
think we
to?
put the most important, interesting things out there. I'm very excited for the podcast. I can also ask my virtual assistants to clip it up so that we have like short form content, because I usually like to put that out there across my platforms
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, we've talked about the most interesting things. What might be interesting as well as my long-term vision is, I want to what I'm doing for donors right now, I eventually also want to do for fathers. So I want to be a young father and want to share and help other men become fathers, healthy fathers, find the right partner, and have children, raise children well, and find balance between the modern day and time and money and all those things, and our roots, our um, wired, wired for family bodies. So at some point, um, I would like to be at a position where the Open Donor Association is a nonprofit um, place where, okay, and now we have a space where people can connect to donors healthily, and then I want to be a father in that time, and then after that do the same I did with the Open Donor Association for fathers, and eventually I want to just grow a platform, a place, a way, a path that makes it easier for people to grow their families and be healthy in any way, right? Because we're facing modern problems such as sleep issues or screen time with kids, and I just would like to have a place where you can learn about all those things, where you can control those things, make sure your kids are not watching porn and stuff like that. Um, but that's like my long-term vision for the life. Because if I die, it would be nice if people said there was a baby boom because of that guy. That would be a nice ending to my life.
I love it. I love the vision, and I love that that you are bringing these big ideas into real life, right? Like we all daydream, we all have these ideas that most of the time they're just ideas, but to actually execute on them and turn those ideas into reality, that's pretty cool. And it sure seems like you're doing that. So I appreciate it.
With God's help, I do it with God's help every day. Every day
Yeah.
I just trust him and follow him. I don't try to trust my brain.
Yeah. Yep. Follow your heart. Um, awesome. All right. I'm going to hit stop. It will take probably a minute or two to just upload everything.